We are joined today by a very special guest. He is a journalist and a comedian, the former host of Redacted Tonight, current host of his new show, Unredacted Tonight, which is available both on his YouTube channel, Lee Camp, and at unredactedtonight.com. Please welcome the man you all know, Lee Camp. Lee Camp, great to see you, Lee.
What's up,
Hey.
Lee?
Hey guys, really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. We met for the first time on Kit's show on Hard Lens. I see Kit's in the chat here. What's up, Kit? Shout out to Kit. Yeah, it's great to have you on. Obviously, you went live about the end of the ceasefire this morning, which we're going to get to. That's our first real segment of the day.
I was just trying to scoop you.
Yeah, right. You're just trying to scoop us. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so we are, of course, going to get to that in a few minutes. But you do have this new show of yours, Unredacted Tonight. I remember watching your show on RT, so I've been following you for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, you were definitely one of those shows, I think, for a lot of us who went into the Sanders campaign Democrats who kind of went down the rabbit hole and came out the other side radicalized. You kind of had to replace your entire media ecosystem.
Yeah.
And your show was definitely, for me personally, I think for a lot of people, the replacement for political comedy that aired on the corporate media, like Daily Show, most obviously. But yeah, I was watching your show every episode you dropped during those dark days.
Thank you. I'm honored. Yeah, I think that story is not unusual, and a lot of people know that after 8 years, RT America entirely was sanctioned into oblivion 3 years ago, along with my show. And I did some, I've been doing plenty of things. I've been very busy, but I only recreated the show 4 weeks ago. I brought it back as Unredacted Tonight, and it's now completely independent, not connected to RT or anyone else. It's just my own thing. I mean, I'm kind of lucky in that when we were doing Redacted Tonight, I was writing all my own stuff anyway, so it's not like I needed a team of Daily Show writers and everything else. But yeah, just brought it back, and very excited about it. But it definitely feels like weird times.
Well, what was it like working for RT? Because obviously you've had entire, pieces written about you and your time at RT. I remember there was a New York Times piece about you, and obviously in certain like liberal class circles, it has a reputation, but my experience watching, RT hosts, they're some of the most independent, free-thinking people I've ever, watched or read. Chris Hedges was on RT, obviously you, Fiorella Isabel. What was it like working there? What kind of freedoms did you have there to say what you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, so completely free in terms of my regard. I was in kind of my own little world because I was doing comedy. I think Chris Hedges was in his own little world because he was already so well known before he came there. They basically just let him go do his thing. And I was really in a different world. I mean, I never was told to say anything. I was never told not to say anything. And I knew from day one in 2014 that as a comedian on television, national or international TV, as opposed to YouTube, this opportunity would never exist again. I was amazed it existed at the time, that you could have that level of freedom. I mean, you like anyone would have a brain cell knows that like The Daily Show or John Oliver may do some impressive things here or there, but they are still accountable to a very large corporate structure. The excellent book that was written about The Daily Show right after Jon Stewart left actually has a few pages where they say basically anytime they insulted a corporation, if they were connected to an advertiser, they had to call the corporation before the show and try and convince them that it was okay to make fun of them because it's cool. So it's like, that's the level of approval you needed. And
it's ironical deconstruction.
Yeah, it's fun for us to trash Walmart. So, and I never faced anything like that. And sure enough, it got eventually crushed by the U.S. government. RT America did. And I will never have a show like that on U.S. television. I am certain of it. But luckily, we live in a world now where I can recreate this show as Unredacted Tonight and put it up on my YouTube, and hopefully people will find it and enjoy it. So.
Right, and now you'll have an AI censor bot throw you off the air instead of a higher up human
now
being.
I just have the self-censorship of YouTube where you're like, listen, if I say the word genocide, that's probably going to knock my views down.
Right. Yeah. No. It's well, we talked a little bit about this when I met you on Hardlands last week, where you said, in a way, now I think it was you who said this, that in a way now you have more freedom on the network TV airwaves than you do on the internet.
Well, on certain airwaves, yeah, because it's like most of the shows I know, a lot of the bigger ones, they won't say curse words because YouTube has said they don't like that, or the algorithm doesn't like that. They're, we're leaving out the word.
We've done all right.
Yeah, we've done okay. Yeah, that's one of the things that's one of their suggestions we just ignore entirely.
Just ignore, yeah. We a lot of programs are leaving out the word Nazi because they don't want to show that to like. And so some of the most horrific shit in the world, like a genocide in Gaza, there's a lot of YouTubers are like, yeah, it's not going to be good for the algorithm.
No, it's great. I mean, I have one video in our segment today that I made sure there's no blood. I made sure there's no dead bodies. You try to capture the essence of what's going on there. It's very hard to do that without a lot of blood and guts, but you have to make an effort. But go ahead.
It's an interesting question because creators, performers, artists, they always had a censor if they wanted to reach a large audience. Rod Serling created the Twilight Zone because he figured the censors would be too stupid to get the metaphors on the social issues he was trying to comment on if he couched it in science fiction structures. It seems like we had this very brief period where the internet was pirate radio,
right?
Where you could just go do anything and they weren't paying attention to it. And now we're almost back at the days of advertising Lucky Strikes, and we can't say bad things about cigarettes.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think not enough is made of this, that there was a window of freedom online where a time when the internet was available on everyone's phone. So we're talking 2008 roughly to like 2016. And I just saw my numbers crash after 2016. My Facebook, which was one of my largest platforms, just became frozen in time, like an extreme shadow ban. And my other platforms as well. Now, of course, I've had YouTube channels banned. I was banned on TikTok after just 2 months of covering Gaza with no right to appeal. So it's the censorship has become immense. And you compare that to this brief window. And during that window, we saw a lot of the largest protest movements. It doesn't mean they were all successful, but the largest protest movements in some ways the world had ever seen. I mean, Occupy is a global protest movement, and Black Lives Matter started during that time. And, the Bernie movement was during stuff. Yeah. The Bernie movement began during that time. And so I think, I don't think it's obvious that the ruling elite realized this needed to be reined in extremely.
Right. Yeah, and it seemed like Trump was really the turning point. It seemed like when Trump was elected, that's when a lot of centers of media power decided, well, yeah, it looks like Trump really used social media to get elected, so we better censor what people say on social media. I think that was a huge tipping point. I don't think it would have happened had that election gone the other way, because they would have figured, well, this is containable. It would have happened eventually. Like, that whole center was never going to hold. That was the general thesis of the Bernie movement, which is that the liberal center is not going to hold. We're either going to go socialist or fascist, and spoilers, look where we are 10 years later. But it was pretty obvious that it was going to go that way eventually. But I think the real tipping point at least on the sort of elite side was the election of Trump, which they blamed in large part on a free and open internet.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what's funny about that is at the same time, they were giving him immense amounts of media coverage, good or bad, because he has lived his whole life on like bad coverage is better than no coverage.
Right.
And so I remember the numbers from right after that first campaign, the 2016. campaign was that he got 16 times as much coverage as Bernie Sanders when Bernie was in the race, and he got 10 times as much coverage as Hillary Clinton up to the end. And so it's like, so on one hand, it's like social media was important for him. Also, he was getting 10 times the coverage of any other candidate.
Yeah.
Well, do you think we're in a moment that's kind of analogous to when Lenny Bruce was playing small clubs? Because you look at what you're doing. If you've ever seen Max Blumenthal stand up, it's actually very good. And what strikes me watching that is, I think very much like a lot of Lenny Bruce's audience probably felt at the time, there was a disconnect between the kind of Shecky Green stuff that was on TV and where the culture actually was. But there was no way they were going to let that act go on TV. But in 10 years, that act was on TV. Carlin was on TV. Original Saturday Night Live was on TV. Do you think there's going to be a breakthrough moment? Because it's so clear that what you're doing and whatever the hell the Daily Show is now, is doing, you're much more in tune with where the culture is than anything that you can find in those outlets today.
Do you mean breakthrough in terms of is this type of stuff going to get onto television?
Basically, yeah. Is it eventually going to be incorporated into the mainstream of the culture or the corporate platforms in the way that, in the early 60s, it would have been inconceivable that they were going to put somebody like George Carlin on TV. But eventually that shift happened.
So I actually think it's the reverse, right? Because I was on television, and they realized I was on television because of a loophole, and they banned and obliterated all of it. And the YouTube was banned, still is banned around the world, and thousands of videos digitally burned. And so similar happened with Lenny Bruce and George Carlin and some others, where Lenny Bruce got famous for kind of more friendly, more polite comedy. Then once he was hugely famous, it very much became anti-state, anti-police, anti-church, really going after the police and the church were the biggest things. They then started chasing him around the country, arresting him on stage, threatening venues with taking their liquor licenses if he performed. That it kind of destroyed his life. He was fighting multiple court battles. He couldn't make the money because he couldn't perform in most places. And ultimately he OD'd, but really they chased him to his death. With George Carlin, he got lucky, and though his trial of the 7 dirty words did go all the way to Supreme Court, but he got lucky in that HBO had just kind of shown up on the map. They gave him the freedom to do whatever the hell he wanted. And he was in this kind of very tiny window of just essentially true freedom for stand-up. But it doesn't exist on television that much. However, you have a bunch of right-wing comedians who are across this country who are like, we can't say anything anymore. And it's like, on a stage, maybe not on television, but on a stage, you can say whatever you want. It's just some people might get offended. And people have a right to get offended. People might get offended because I'm left-wing. Like, I don't, these, people running around saying Chappelle and Joe Rogan are the most censored comedians. It's like, they have the largest audiences and contracts in the world. How are they censored?
Yeah, no, I mean, I always felt that, I always thought that was a bit overblown. There are certain things I can't say. I mean, there is it is, a censorious culture in a lot of ways, especially the last, 5-6 years or so. And the internet has gotten a lot harder. And that is really, I mean, what you're saying on a comedy club, on a stage. Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of live performance, is that it's kind of undocumented. That, Russ and I come out of live theater backgrounds. It's one of the reasons I love theater. There's so many things you could say in a play that you can't say in a movie, right? Because when something is documented on film, it goes in theaters and then it goes on TV. It becomes a part of the permanent culture, whereas a play runs and then it goes away. And so there's that freedom there, where you find a lot of like theatrical dialogue is just much more hard hitting than you would see on a movie screen. And so that's the beauty of the live space. But in terms of everywhere else, I think it's getting harder. I think we're going backwards.
Yeah. I mean, in many ways, I think that's true. Luckily I can still put my stuff on YouTube.
Right.
They might not show it to anyone, but I still am able. I put my stuff on all the platforms, and most of them are semi shadow banned. But it's better than Lenny Bruce's situation, where literally he couldn't get in front of anyone. Like he was running around the country being arrested. So.
Yeah, and when you see, sorry, Russell, to cut you off, but one more just button on this. I think I see a lot of very anti-PC comedy nowadays. Like that seems to be kind of thriving. To me, the ones who make the most noise about how censored they are the ones who are past their prime and just not funny anymore. I mean, you have Bill Maher complaining that the college kids don't laugh at his jokes. I mean, I don't laugh. I'm a college dropout. I never liked the college scene. I don't like college kids generally. I don't laugh at your jokes either. Like that's not them. That's because you suck.
If he would turn Columbia into a barn.
Right. Yeah. Jerry Seinfeld too. I mean, all these comics who bitch about, like, it's such a small dick thing to do, is to bitch as a comedian that people aren't laughing at your jokes.
Well,
like, I saw about blaming the customer.
I saw someone put two Seinfeld clips next to each other. One was from like 5 years ago, where he goes, "Oh, all these comedians whining about you can't say things. Isn't that what we do? We find ways to say the things we can't." Right. Like, comedians have always been about figuring out what they can get away with. He's like, it's your job, just do it. Then 5 years later, he's like, you can't say anything anymore. People are offended.
They don't think Pop-Tart jokes are funny anymore. What's with that? People used to find cereal funny in my day. What happened?
He's really just frustrated that after years of having zero political statements at all, like, he literally is like, and look, I got into comedy partially because of him, and now I'm taking a 180 on my view of him. But it like zero political content at all, and he loved it. He loves not saying anything about the world, but he decides to weigh in on the fact that we should all support genocide.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Do you, because you're kind of a fusion between this kind of politics podcast space, but you're also coming out of the comedy world, which is a branch of the arts, and you're obviously very knowledgeable about it. We often lament that so much of that world has gone lib. Jimmy Dore talks about that a lot. That it both feels like it's a revolution without dancing, which is very bizarre. Feels like there's no art really for people to gather around. And also, as somebody who is doing this fusion, do you find it hard to get people who have artistic talent, who are not libs, who will actually collaborate with you?
Yeah, we did have trouble finding correspondence for Redacted Tonight back in the day. I luckily found John F. O'Donnell pretty early on, and he was a mainstay for many years. But we had a rotating, someone would come and do it for like a year, and then they'd leave. And finding a new comedian who was, for one thing, capable of writing 10 new minutes a week, but on top of that, capable of not just regurgitating kind of CNN talking points and being what I view as further left than CNN and MSNBC. It was kind of a hassle to find those comedians. Sadly, there were not a lot of them. When I was getting more into this, my stuff became more political, as before Occupy, and then Occupy, people started to know my name more and stuff. It's like, I kept thinking I was going to be mobbed by other people doing the same type of thing as me, and it really hasn't happened. There just aren't that many. I guess it's maybe in a certain way better for my career, but it's terrible for the world.
Yeah, it's something that has been very depressing. We want to do a theater festival because we both come out of theater. I did a call for submissions. I've got a few hundred I have to get through, but in the first 50, I think 8 of them are about abortion bans. Like 8 of them.
Really?
And yes, and I'm not saying that's not an important issue.
Right.
But for the people who write plays now, the vast majority, at least from what I'm seeing, and I can't say this really surprises me, those are their only issues, because the only people and this is another thing. I think it's also partly that the cities where artists have tended to congregate became so expensive that to play in that game is just solely the province of elites. at this point. You know,
That's
rent
interesting.
in New York, where I live, I think the average just hit a record, like $5,600 a month.
Wow.
Well, and
So
even
who's paying that?
and even beyond the cities, it's to have most of the people doing that are not. It's not their main gig. It's not their full time job.
Right.
So that the life has become so expensive, and it's so tough to get by in America that people don't have time for the side passion that is their true passion. Like,
Right.
you know, they don't have time to write scripts. They're working 3 jobs. They're driving Uber in the middle of the night and peeing in a bottle. When are they writing the
Right.
script?
Right.
Well, and the people who
Exactly.
have the leisure time are not going to write anything that is really of interest. Certainly, they have no class
Yeah.
perspective because they don't have those kinds of material concerns. That's why their idea. I did a call for submission for political plays, and their idea of comedy is conservatives are stupid, and
Yeah.
they're all troglodytes, and their idea of social issues are. I got a whole bunch about gun control. I
Right.
mean, I agree with the point of view, but there's other shit going on
Right.
in the world besides these
Right.
cultural, social issues that you can afford to have as your exclusive political concern.
Yeah. And the other thing, and this goes for reporters on television, it goes for actors
Right.
on television, it goes for comedians is you get to a certain point where you realize if you're going to keep saying things that are in some regard revolutionary, in some regard radical, like outside of the normal talking points of CNN, then you can achieve some success, but you're ultimately going to come up against a glass ceiling. And I was naive enough in my early days of comedy in my 20s to think that I could just be good enough at what I was doing. And if I was talking about real shit, it didn't matter if the crowd's laughing and I'm doing my job. Then I started to realize in my later 20s, like, oh, all these, networks, they would, they'd even though I was performing 3 times a night, every night in New York City, at all the clubs and doing great, it's like they would have you on once, like CNN would have me once and realize they're never doing that again. MSNBC would have me once and realize they're never doing that again. Comedy Central one time, never doing that again. It was a common theme. It was like, you're not fitting in the club,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Russell.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of why we're not seeing an arts scene. I mean, going back to that Lenny Bruce thing, one of the things, I'm assuming you saw the movie with Dustin Hoffman, the Bob Fosse made about him. One of the things that was really interesting, having come out of the age of live performance that I did, is that back then, it didn't matter if you sucked and you were starting out, you got paid.
Right.
You got paid. So that like you see when he's starting out, they're paying him like $5 a night or whatever. This idea of like door splits and you got to bring 20 friends and all of that, like that did not exist. There's no financial support for anyone who's going to kick out the fence other than really like these kinds of venues, which have their own problem. It's so easy to cancel people. And I think that might be why you're not cultivating a real left art scene to accompany left politics.
Yeah, I think all that's true. And it's true with comedians in New York. And, luckily I was making my living touring colleges where you can make some money. But when I would do shows every night in New York City and they're paying like $10 a spot. And during those years, the early to mid 2000s, a couple comedians got together and started to create a comedian union that didn't last very long, but it lasted long enough to force the clubs to up it from $10 to $25 a spot. And then like 2 years go by, the union disbands fairly quickly. And I'm going to perform at Caroline's, one of the biggest comedy clubs. And they paid me $10 again instead of the 25. And I said, why? I thought it was 25. And they said, oh, well, that's, not on Tuesdays. Or they had some excuse. And I was like, just the tiniest thing.
Right. Wow. Unredactedtonight.com is the website where you can find Lee's new show, and you could also find it on Lee Camp YouTube.
Please clap.